And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, do Black Friday sales mean hot deals on threats of violence and amateur wrestling? And with multiple earthquakes in the Pacific Northwest, is it finally time to get out the gnarly surfboard and hit that tsunami wave like a pro? And now, the podcast host whose producer Keith is somewhere inside his faithful dog's body, Pete Dominic.
Thank you, Pico. So much more truth to that than you can imagine, because the dog, which is a Havanese, I'll include a picture of the dog in today's show notes for subscribers only. Only subscribers get to see pictures of my dog. I'm sure I posted them elsewhere. But the dog looks like it's got a human face. We've always joked about that. Its eyes are like blue. The dog looks like Michael Smirkanish. And so that is how I think about Keith, my fake assistant producer, as well. Well, hello and welcome to today's episode of the podcast. Thank you very much for joining me. I've got two very good guests, and one is a first-timer, and the other is Lizz Winstead, who is a hilarious comedian, co-creator of The Daily Show on Comedy Central, and an abortion rights activist. It gets very real and funny, and it's such an amazing conversation. Probably, honestly, I think it was one of my favorite conversations I've ever had with Lizz. And I'm sure I've interviewed her over 20 times, hung out with her several other times. I've known her as a stand-up comic for probably over half my career, but today was very special and raw and amazing. And we start at about 1 hour and 26 minutes in. If you want to listen to my conversation with Lizz Winstead about abortion and activism and her experience, check it out there. But before that, I welcome a guy onto the show for the first time who came highly recommended from, I forget who referred me. I'm sure it was a listener, though. His name is Robert P. Jones. He's the founder and CEO of the Public Religion Research Institute. And he's also the author of two super important, fascinating books, which I'm learning so much from preparing to talk to him and then talking to him today. They are The End of White Christian America, and he proves that with data. That's his 2016 book, which won a lot of awards. And his most recent book, out last year, called White Too Long, The Legacy of White Supremacy in American Christianity. This guy grew up Southern Baptist in Jackson, Mississippi. And he is a smart and fascinating dude. And I guess I'm blown away by my conversation with him. And so I've got two really special talks today. Lizz Winstead, Robert P. Jones, and my conversation with him is first and starts at about 36 minutes in after the big news recap. And while I know different people listen to different shows at different times, I'm taping this on Thursday. Well, technically it's Wednesday, but this is the Thursday show, and so I want to invite you to hang out with us virtually tonight at 8 East. And every Thursday at 8 East, I host a virtual hangout, and we have a great time every time getting to know each other, sharing ideas, opinions, talking about the news, talking about our world, making fun of each other, interviewing each other. It's great fun, and it's tonight at 8. You got to be a stand-up subscriber. If you aren't, sign up right now, join us tonight, and then cancel. I mean, hang out. The hangouts alone are worth it. We are building a wonderful community of thoughtful people that are helping each other get through this journey of life and remain in reality, because there's so much crazy happening all the time around us, and you're bombarded by it through social media and so many other sources that it can get very overwhelming. And so I'm here for you, trying to anchor it, and you are certainly helping me anchor into reality as well. And so many great people. I talked to several subscribers and listeners already this week, and I'd like to talk to you. So reach out, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Hope to see you tonight at 8 p.m. East. You'll get an email every morning, and the link to the Zoom will be in that. So sign up now, standupwithpete.com or patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Also, all this week, the show's sponsored by GiveWell. If you haven't donated to givewell.org, do that now. Givewell.org/standup. Write it down. Don't forget. Set a reminder. Talk to your Apple Watch. don't forget to subscribe to GiveWell. Alexa, remind me to subscribe to givewell.org. Okay, sorry. That was probably a lot of your Alexas are talking right now. You're gonna be mad at me. I'm sorry. All right, let's get to the news. It's time for the recap. What happened yesterday? It's time for the last 24. The most up-to-date, comprehensive, and entertaining news recap of almost any daily podcast out there. How do I know that? I don't. I'm just saying that. Let's be fair and balanced and keep them honest and go out front and also get after it and everything else that gets said on cable news. And Rachel Maddow says, watch this space. Okay, we'll watch this space. That one irks me for some reason. I don't know. In the last 24 hours, there were some very strange and tragic kind of accidents. A woman was trapped in her car in Niagara Falls. Did you see this? And she died. She was right at the edge of the falls. And the Coast Guard came and pulled her out heroically through a helicopter. It was nuts. Speaking of helicopters, the head of India's military died, along with his wife and many others, in a helicopter crash in India. And someone, apparently that was mentally ill, I still don't know, set fire to the Christmas tree, which turned out to be a fake, surprisingly enough, in front of Fox News. I mean, I used to work across the street from Fox News. Sirius XM is literally across the street. And I don't think it was any secret. There wasn't a tree there and anything. But anyway, it was just a lot of people were making fun of that. And that started a lot of conversations yesterday, including on Fox and Friends. This really isn't as important as the first two stories I mentioned, where lives obviously were lost, or everything else that I'm going to mention. But I never really have it in order of importance. I do just grab stuff and try to have a through line. And so here is the Fox and here's the news breaking late last night on Fox News Live. This is what it sounded like from the New York anchor Shannon Bream.
All right, a bit of breaking news for you tonight. You're looking at live images. This is the Fox Square in New York, outside of Fox headquarters. It appears that our giant Christmas tree there, just a couple of minutes ago, was completely engulfed in flames. It appears crews are there on the scene. You see the smoke in the aftermath as they're trying to get that under control. We're going to keep you posted. It is a large, beautiful, highly decorated tree right there on the Avenue of the Americas, 6th Avenue there in New York City. But our thanks to the crews who look like they've just about got that thing under control. We will continue to track it and let you know when we find out more about what has happened there. But it looks like folks are safe and sound for now.
I mean, so everybody was talking about that all day in terms of the symbolism and pick your favorite pundit, commentator, influencer. But the details are apparently a man allegedly climbed the 50-foot artificial Christmas tree and set fire to it just after midnight. He's now in custody. Apparently, he's a 49-year-old guy. Doesn't appear to have a political motive. No injuries were reported. They're saying the guy is apparently homeless, and he's going to be charged with arson, criminal mischief, criminal nuisance, criminal tampering, criminal trespassing, a bunch of other charges as well. And, well, here they are on Fox and Friends yesterday morning reacting to this and saying that, it's all because of how much crime there is. And also the Christmas tree represents Hanukkah, apparently.
But think about it. To Ainsley's earlier point, who sets a Christmas tree on fire?
It's a tree that unites us, that brings us together. It's about the Christmas spirit.
Sure.
It is about the holiday season. Mm-hmm. It's about Jesus. It's about Hanukkah. It is about everything that we stand for as a country. Freedom and being able to worship the way that you want to worship. It makes me so mad.
Well, it does. But it goes to the larger issue of safety. And we have been talking for a very long time. This city has gone south when it comes to safety. We don't feel safe when we come to work in the morning. We don't feel safe when we go home at night. It's just one of those things. And when you look at that symbol, and so many, and we were talking about this yesterday, how through the years, people, hundreds of thousands of tourists have come to New York City to celebrate the Christmas season, and they walk up and down Fifth Avenue and our street, 6th Avenue.
Kind of all we have left,
and
right?
they look at the lights, and today there are no lights because somebody burned down our Christmas tree.
And I hope we put it back. I mean, I hope we put it back.
I hope we build it back bigger and better.
And we have we got to do a sequel to the Christmas tree lighting. And I just think that
Let's do another lighting.
And,
I agree.
The early indications are the guy's a psycho.
The guy makes me laugh. He does make me laugh, Kilmeade. I mean, he is a psycho himself. But the performances on that show, I mean, they're so easy to parody. But what was she talking about when she said it's all we have left? What on earth is she talking about? It's New York City. Oh, God. All right. Well, a lot of great takes on this. Parker Malloy, who I love, she turned the video into like a 9-minute Yule log of the tree on fire, and you can just watch it. A lot of people had a lot of fun with it, especially since nobody obviously got killed or injured even. I think my favorite take was whoever said that Fox News viewers thought it was a cross, which is why they lit it on fire. And it turned out they were wrong. It was a Christmas tree. And speaking of Fox News, let me just get this out of the way. This is Fox News superstar Tucker Carlson talking to his kind of like British counterpart, Nigel Farage, and said something. I don't even know how to understand why he would say this. I always just assume that he says anything that will get him attention, including mostly just really outrageous things. But Tucker Carlson and Nigel Farage were talking about how the prime minister, who's a right-winger himself, Boris Johnson of UK, got COVID and it somehow changed him. And, well,
we've seen more U-turns in policy from a Johnson government than I've seen in any government in my lifetime.
Yes.
And
in a very embarrassing way.
Oh, some of it's been shocking.
So somebody who knows him told me, and I should be interested in getting your take on this, that getting COVID emasculated him. It changed him. It feminized him. It weakened him as a man. Do you think that's...
Well, I think he was very seriously ill.
Oh, for sure he was.
And I think... I mean, one of the things we have learned from COVID is people who are 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds overweight tend to have fared very badly.
Sure.
Now, we don't talk about it much.
But the virus itself, this is true, does tend to take away the life force in some people, I notice. I mean, it does feminize people. No one ever says that, but it's true.
Now, of course, these two icons of masculinity, Tucker Carlson and Nigel Farage, continued there. But you got to stop it because, well, what the hell's that all about? Feminizes you. You know, it's kind of how he does it, too. He's always like a grain of truth. He said something, what did he say, about how COVID really affects people. It steals their life force. Yeah, for sure. For sure it does. I think that's actually a good way of explaining it. But then saying it feminizes you, I think what he's missing, I think what Tucker Carlson might be missing, maybe he's never heard of man flu. It's how men, we're generalizing, are just much more terrible at getting sick. We're not very strong when it comes to dealing with pain and discomfort. If you define strength, of course, by how much pain you can take, then it might be a fair way to say women are stronger than men. That's how I like to think about strength. How much pain can you take? And, you know, men get sick and maybe it's harder for us. I don't know. But it feminizes you. My wife overheard me playing that and lost her shit. Would love to know what you think about that. I'm going to bring that up tonight. I'm going to play that clip at tonight's Hangout just to watch people's brains explode if they haven't seen it yet. All right, before we get to some more serious and important issues, let's have a little laugh with J.L. Covan's impersonation of Donald Trump's reaction to the Fox Christmas tree being set on fire. I mean, I think there's like 4 laugh out loud moments in this for me, and he was actually standing outside in New York City, so that you hear the sound of New York in the background, but I don't know. I love this.
This is your president talking outside a construction site where Sleepy Joe Biden's Build Back America for the Worse is destroying our country. You see what they did at Fox News? Because of Sleepy Joe's infrastructure, which is totally terrorist funding, he's allowing people to have better roads and better ladders so that they can climb powerful Fox News Christmas trees and burn them. As somebody who's an expert in Christianity, despite never going to church, I wanted to go to church, and then the priest one day told me, he said, "Sir, you're too strong a Christian. You'll intimidate everybody else trying to do strong prayers." So I said, okay, I'll golf on Sundays instead of doing that. But now we have radical left people. Jesus stood for many things. He stood for low taxes, strong guns, and Christmas trees. That's why we wear Christmas trees, because Jesus died climbing a Christmas tree. He was trying to put up that star. How tricky that, not for me, I'm so tall, but Jesus wasn't as tall as me. And putting up that star was very dangerous, and he fell. And we honor that today. So by burning the Christmas tree outside Fox News, a place that is so important to Christians, anti-immigrant, anti-socialism, anti-peace, anti-second chances, nothing more Jesus Christ than that. So we stand with Fox News, and we're going to deliver an even bigger Christmas tree made of solid gold, how Jesus would have wanted it. And we're not going to let the terrorism, the radical left, or the Sleepy Joe infrastructure that allows for terrorists to set fires so quickly because of better roads and better ladders. So, Merry Christmas from, and I say this humbly, the greatest Christian on earth, still your president, and we'll see what happens.
The greatest Christian on earth, still your president, and we'll see what happens. J.L. Covan, I hope you could hear that. Okay. All right, well, here is the actual president, the current president, and that is Joe Biden, saying that it's not going to be infrastructure week, but
I don't think I could take one more phrase. It's going to be infrastructure week. But guess what? It's going to be infrastructure decade now, man.
Oh, yeah. Infrastructure decade now, man. President Biden was in Kansas City on Wednesday afternoon, visited the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority while touting an infrastructure bill that it would give over $12 billion to both Missouri and Kansas. President Biden also took a moment to separate himself from Bernie Sanders and those of us who don't think you should be able to make hundreds of millions of dollars by saying this.
I'm a capitalist. I always have, I have a good friend of Bernie's, but we disagree. I'm not a socialist. I'm a capitalist. You should be able to make $1 million or $100 million if you can.
$100 million. You should be able to make $100 million if you can. Okay. Well, let's not debate that right now. Moving on. Democrats are still pissed, as they should be, about what Congresswoman Lauren Boebert did and said about Ilhan Omar last week, calling her a terrorist over and over, basically. Here's Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts introducing a resolution to remove Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado from committee assignments for her Islamophobic comments.
We have heard the hate and credible threats that have been directed at Rep. Omar and her staff. Words have consequences. We must acknowledge that and respond with action. We've introduced this resolution today to do just that and to send a powerful message to every Muslim and every marginalized person who has ever questioned their place in this country or in the halls of power. We see you. You belong. You are powerful. And you deserve a life free from fear and filled with dignity and love. How we respond in moments like these will have a lasting impact, and history will remember us for it.
Also, yeah, that was great. Also, we heard from, well, several more, but here is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the same issue.
Representative Boebert, whatever her intentions may be for her racism and flagrant bigotry, needs to experience a consequence for her actions, whether she's seeking it out or not. Because when we inconsistently apply consequences to bigotry, we invite more people to test these boundaries. It's pretty simple. You threaten a colleague or you incite incredibly racist rhetoric against a specific colleague of yours in the United States Congress, you do not have committees. This should be simple. This should be easy. Unfortunately, the Republican caucus is not making it easy, but we should.
Oh, and then there is Congresswoman Cori Bush, who, a lot of liberals, Democrats, progressives complain that Democrats don't talk tough enough. They don't fight hard enough. They're bad at messaging. Have you met Cori Bush, Congresswoman Cori Bush? Tell this woman she's not tough enough.
If we're serious about tackling the systems of entrenched white supremacy that stain every fiber of this country, then we need to start right here, right in this Capitol. We need to start with this lying, Islamophobic, race baiting, violence inciting, white supremacist sentiment spreading, Christmas tree gun toting elected official who is out here straight up calling her colleagues terrorists. Lauren Boebert is a danger to this country. She is a danger to the Muslim staffers that work here. She is a danger to her fellow members of Congress. Removing her from her committees is the least leadership can do to protect every employee, visitor, and member of this body.
Damn. Cori Bush laying it on. Fire. I thought that was great. I got to try to get her on the program as well. Okay. And, oh, by the way, yesterday I said that I wanted to get that Michigan State Senator McMorrow on, who made that impassioned speech I played all 4 minutes of. And listener Canadian Carlo reached out to her and sent her an email, getting her email before I even had her address. Then I reached out to her, and looks like we're going to get her on this Friday, I think, or Saturday. I'm going to hopefully talk to her. Anyway, thank you. All right, moving on. I've got Hakeem Jeffries. Here he is, not to be outdone by the squad. I mean, I think he was, but he's pretty aligned with them, isn't he? Here he is talking about what the Republican Party has become.
What a group. The base, the Republican Party. Conspiracy theorists, QAnon supporters, and wannabe authoritarian sympathizers intent on destroying our democracy. In their words, not ours. And so we're going to continue to keep the focus on delivering for the American people, but this is frightening stuff.
Frightening stuff indeed, Congressman Jeffries. Here is the Senate Majority Leader, the shoe man, Chuck Schumer, on the Senate floor going after the anti-vax movement.
Some of the anti-vaxxers here in this chamber remind me of what happened 400 years ago when people were clinging to the fact that the sun revolved around the earth. They just didn't believe science. Or 300 years ago when they were sure, or 500 years ago when they were sure the earth was flat. It's just like that. The science is here.
Is it just like that? I don't know, but that's Chuck Schumer heading out at the anti-vaxxers in the actual U.S. Senate. Oh, wait, here's one. It's Governor Ron DeSantis claiming people talk about global warming as a pretext to do a bunch of left-wing things. Here's one.
What I've found is people, when they start talking about things like global warming, they typically use that as a pretext to do a bunch of left-wing things that they would want to do anyways. And so we're not doing any left-wing stuff. What we're doing, though, is just reacting to the fact that, okay, we're a flood-prone state. We do have storms. I don't know that we really haven't had more storms in the last 10, 15 years than we had in other portions of, you could pick different periods where we've had a lot.
Complete denialist. There he goes. A perfect example of Chuck Schumer is talking about, although he's not in a Senate. He wants to be the president. That is Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. By the way, for you Floridians listening, what is the status of solar power? Have you yet adapted and adopted the benefits of the star that we do, in fact, rotate around to power your mosquito-killing robots or whatever the hell you do down there? All right, well, here's one more piece of sound. This is from the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, who was also asked about staffers not feeling safe in Congress because of lawmakers like Congresswoman Lauren Boebert. Here's what she had to say.
I'll never forgive former President of the United States and his lackeys and his bullies that he sent to the Capitol for the trauma that was exerted on our staff. These are largely younger people who come with idealism to work in the Capitol on either side of the aisle and whatever it is.
By the way, well, first of all, she's a Catholic, so isn't she supposed to be able to forgive? She can't forgive Donald Trump. Oh, wow. She also said that the Capitol now is now safer than it was 1 year ago, but she adds,
I don't think that whatever preparation anybody would have made, that anybody could predict that the President of the United States would incite an insurrection, and a violent one. So I don't fault anybody for not knowing, who have responsibility of communication and the rest on all of this, that the president was instigating this.
All right, I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but let's go back to President Biden, who had something to say yesterday outside the White House a day after he talked with Russia's Vladimir Putin, who's got like 170,000 troops mounted on the border of Ukraine and Russia. Here is President Biden yesterday talking to reporters.
But the idea the United States is going to unilaterally use force to confront Russia invading Ukraine is not in the cards right now. But what will happen is there will be severe consequences that will have.
All right, so he's trying to, communicate to the American public that we're not going to be getting in a war with Russia. That's not in the cards right now. But we will give the Army and the Air Force, or whatever, they don't have much of an Air Force apparently, in Ukraine, everything, all the weapons, technology, and support that they need to fight the Russians and make it as bloody as possible. I think that's what I'm hearing and reading between the lines. I'll be talking more about that. Bill B is dying to talk about that with me, and I always love talking to him and hearing his analysis. He takes in a whole bunch of different articles and experts in history and his secret friends in Washington, D.C., and is great at synthesizing it and sharing it with me. So I'm going to try to catch up with him tomorrow, as well as Christian Finnegan and Ophira Eisenberg joining me tomorrow as well. Okay, well, that's all the sound I've got for you right now. A lot more news happened yesterday. Of course, these are the stories that I am picking. I always miss stuff. I always undercover things. Speaking of undercovering, I'm going to be talking with Dr. Arthur Kaplan at the end of the week. I'll probably post that for the Monday or Tuesday episode. And I saw this that Dr. Kaplan tweeted, and I just wanted to mention it. He writes, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy sounded the alarm Tuesday about the crisis in youth mental health in a dramatic report that blames the pandemic for escalating ills like depression. The report also makes terribly clear things were awful well before the virus hit American shores. So undercovered. I'll talk with him about that. And, of course, I'm sure a lot more. And we'll post it next week. Dr. Arthur Kaplan, always great. All right, well, there's a whole bunch of other stories, as there always is, that I don't have audio, commentary, or necessarily a whole bunch of context for. But I'm taking this stuff in all day, and so I got to put it out there. If you're a news junkie like me, you'll love the news dump. Pete Coe, hit it.
Fox News Christmas tree on fire, kill me in a huff. They just don't understand karma on today's news dump.
This is an American icon. This is our Christmas tree. Right. Someone setting fire to it. What is happening to our country?
So good. Oh, yeah. I love it. Using actual sound from the day. Pete Coe stepping up the game. By the way, another very funny tweet about the Fox News Christmas tree fire in New York City from Maura Quint, who didn't join me this week, but at Behind Your Back, she said, safety reminder, never place your tree close to a dumpster fire. Dumpster fire, of course, is Fox News. All right, let's get to news stories that aren't a burning fake tree out front of Fox News headquarters in New York City. And let's head up to Canada, where they announced yesterday that they, too, would be boycotting the Winter Olympics in Beijing this next winter. 2022 Winter Olympic Games. The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, announced they will send athletes to the Olympics, as will the U.S. and other nations that are now announcing diplomatic boycotts. So, see what kind of pressure that will put on the Chinese. This is a pretty big deal, I guess. And you know what else is a big deal for Canadians? Winter sports. So they're not going to skip the actual competition. Can't China, by the way, control the weather now? Didn't I read that the other day? That should be fun. And let's stay in Canada, where they have officially banned LGBTQ plus conversion therapy. The ban will take place in 30 days. But yesterday they announced they're going to ban the conversion therapy practices after two previous failed attempts. The bill passed unanimously in the House of Commons and the Senate, Canada joining now a growing number of countries to ban conversion practices. Founder of an organization called No Conversion Canada, Nicholas Chavo, said, let me do a Canadian accent. Today, we as celebrate this historic moment. We must thank survivors and their tireless advocacy to reach this moment where conversion therapy is finally outlawed in our country. All right, I feel bad about doing the Canadian accent while reading such a serious and important statement about banning conversion therapy. In the U.S., 20 states have laws in place banning conversion therapy for minors, and 5 states have partial bans. And in the rest of the states, they encourage their kids to call gay kids words. I'm just kidding, but it can be that far from it in some of these places. where they're trying to outlaw anti-bullying rules in school. All right, let's move on to another story. This one is about the Blue Origin space trip that set I guess the highest profile passenger for this one was the former NFL football star and now ABC co-host of Good Morning America. Michael Strahan was supposed to go, but it's been delayed due to forecasted high winds today and Friday, according to Blue Origin, announcing that Wednesday. The latest flight from Jeff Bezos' space travel company, supposed to launch Thursday, has now been pushed back to Saturday. 6 people scheduled to be on the 10-minute space flight. Also joining Strahan, Laura Shepard Churchley, the oldest daughter of America's first astronaut, Alan Shepard. So they're going to blast off in the Dick Rocket on Saturday, if you care. This story was a pretty big deal yesterday because of obvious reasons. The Prime Minister of Finland is a fairly young person to be Prime Minister. It's also a woman. She's a 37-year-old woman. Her name is Sanna Marin. And yesterday she had to issue an apology after she apparently went out clubbing till like 3 in the morning, and she'd been exposed to an individual who tested positive for COVID-19, and they were trying to text her. It was reported Saturday that she had gone out in public with her husband and a group of friends after she'd been in contact with Finland's Minister for Foreign Affairs who tested positive for coronavirus. So this is a big scandal in Finland, where a Facebook post made on Monday said that since she'd been fully vaccinated, no special measures were needed after her potential exposure to COVID-19. However, she later wrote that she received further instructions on one of her other phones stating that she should avoid social contact and get tested. Anyway, it's a whole big thing in Finland, and she said she should have used better judgment. But I think the more interesting and entertaining thing is that the Prime Minister of Finland is this young woman who goes out clubbing till 4 in the morning and doesn't bring her phone. I mean, I'm just impressed that somebody goes out and doesn't bring their phone. So, okay. Let's move on let's come back to the United States, talk a little economics. I saw this headline. Demand for workers reached a record high in October as U.S. businesses continued to scramble for workers. Businesses posted 11 million job openings in October. The Labor Department reporting on Wednesday. If you're trying to find somebody to work for your firm, by the way, use Indeed.com. They're a sponsor of the show, Indeed.com/stand-up. Anyway, the number of workers apparently leaving their jobs on their own has decreased slightly. The number of job openings per unemployed worker has never been higher. The economy is busting out, folks. It's really fascinating what is happening, and I'll keep talking about it with experts here on the show. Let me know who you like, and I will reach out to interview them. And if you're looking to interview someone for your firm, Indeed.com/stand-up. All right, and I guess that's where we will end the news, because I'm telling you, my conversations with Robbie Jones, Dr. Robert P. Jones, and Lizz Winstead today are top-notch. They are high level. This is some of the better work I have done. I'm not sure why I'm talking like this, but before I get to both my guests, I do have to tell you, I want to remind you, I'm not looking at the script that I've been reading all week because I just want to freestyle here and tell you how important it is that if you listen and support the show. I mean, I do reads for a whole bunch of different products, all of which I use and support, from a toothbrush to underwear to, as I mentioned, Indeed.com and the Shopify site. I mean, I like all these things. I use them all, but GiveWell is the organization that I have been promoting the hardest here on the podcast, because after interviewing Peter Singer several years ago about the idea, the philosophy of effective altruism, I learned about this organization that was inspired by that philosophy. I interviewed the CEO last year, and my friend Jim Babowski set this all up to begin with. Longtime listener and subscriber of the show, amazing guy. This organization is so great, so important, and doing such great work. And I think that when you donate to them, it makes a huge difference. I mean, I know that it does. There is proof of it. So go sign up right now, and they're going to match your donation up to $250 if this is the first time you've donated. So go to givewell.org/standup. If you haven't already, I can't tell you how highly I recommend this organization. I know the people working in it. I know the philosophy it's based on, and I know the type of work that they're doing. They're saving lives. They're making lives better each and every day, and you can help by making a donation right now. GiveWell.org/standup. Okay, so coming up, Lizz Winstead, co-creator of The Daily Show. She's doing so much good work. I'll tell you all about it. But first, my conversation with Robert P. Jones. Dr. Jones, that's right. He's the CEO and founder of PRRI.org, the Public Religion Research Institute, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to conducting independent research at the intersection of religion, culture, and public policy. But it gets real personal with Dr. Jones during our conversation. And it's our first conversation, but I think I did a good job preparing for him. He's the author of The End of White Christian American, which won a bunch of awards. It was published in 2016. And then his most recent book is titled White Too Long, The Legacy of White Supremacy in American Christianity. His writing is really good, too. And his Substack is something I highly recommend you subscribe to, robertpjones.substack.com. Find him on Twitter as well at Robert P. Jones. I think you're going to like this one. Here we go. Okay, there he is, Robbie Jones, Dr. Robert P. Jones, or Dr. Jones. Do you have a lot of Indiana Jones jokes?
I don't, but as long as you don't go down into the Bob Jones side of things, I think I'm good.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Bob Jones. You probably have thoughts about him. We can come back to that. But I'm psyched to have you here on the podcast. I'm a big fan of your work, and I think it's very important, both your work and the work of the organization you founded. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks. I'm thrilled to be here.
So just let me talk a little bit about you, introduce you to my audience, because you've had a fascinating life yourself. I want to talk about your childhood a little bit, but maybe we can just talk about what happened during your undergraduate degree, where you were studying math and then you're studying religion in your graduate degrees. Like, how did you grow up and what happened in college?
Yeah, so I grew up Southern Baptist, and I was that kid who was at church all the time growing up. I literally was there like 5 days a week, all the way through like my teenage years. And I went to a little small Baptist college just right outside of my hometown, Mississippi College, right outside of Jackson, Mississippi, where I grew up. But I was a math and computer science major. I was always kind of a tech geek. But as we would say in kind of the vernacular of my childhood, I felt a call to ministry my junior year of college, and so I shifted gears and set off to Southern Baptist Seminary, intending to be a Baptist preacher.
Okay, so you one more question on the childhood. Like, what was like the culture in Jackson, Mississippi? What was your high school like? What was that culture like? I think that growing up for me, and I mean, we're such a diverse group of folks that listen to the show and in this country, and I grew up in upstate New York, and I'm one of those former Catholics you talk about, and we're pretty conservative and Catholic religious, but I think Jackson, Mississippi, Southern Baptist, that's a much different country than even my white rural Catholic upbringing, I think.
My guess is that's right. So I was born in 1968. So I was in elementary school in the 70s. And so one marker of kind of how, Mississippi, not surprisingly, how far behind the country it was on racial justice issues is that I actually remember in the 1970s, the first African-American kids coming to my elementary school. So our school did not get integrated until 1976. That's 22 years after Brown v. Board of Education, right? The Supreme Court decision to desegregate the schools. But that's how long the Jackson Public School Districts, and my school was one of the last ones to be integrated. But that was mid 1970s by the time that happened. And when I got to high school, my high school mascot was Colonel Reb. Right. In other words, the Confederate colonel and we were the rebels. And we were fully integrated. It was basically when I was there, Forest Hill High School, Jackson, Mississippi, it was about 50-50 white and black. And yet, when the football team would score a touchdown, the band would play Dixie and a cheerleader would run up and down up and down the side of the stands with a giant Confederate flag. I mean, that was pretty typical. I and most of my white classmates, because we were so in that world, we didn't bat an eye.
Do you remember or do you know what was taught during that time, much less during that time in high school, specifically about the Civil War? Because we got a different education, I think, in Marcellus, New York.
Well, it wasn't uncommon to hear only half in jest the term the War of Northern Aggression, right, as a euphemism for the Civil War. That was sometimes said tongue in cheek, but there was always kind of this kernel of truth to it. But, not a lot. I knew virtually, literally nothing about Reconstruction. For example, we got nothing on Reconstruction. And even something as close to home in the civil rights movement as Medgar Evers, right? Kind of a giant early civil rights leader from Jackson, Mississippi. In fact, his driveway was only 11 miles from my driveway growing up. And I never heard his name. If you'd asked me as a senior in high school who Medgar Evers was, I would have just stared at you blankly.
Wow. So what happened in college? Was it college when you still had these aspirations to head down this very religious path and pursuit? Did something occur? A series of events? Did you meet some people? Did you have an epiphany?
Yeah, it's funny. So I went to Southern Baptist Seminary, so still very much inside this world, right. that I'd grown up in. But there were a few things. I remember, for example, getting my first Greek New Testament, right? We take Greek so we can read the New Testament in its original language. And one of the early things I remember seeing was on those Greek New Testaments, there's the actual text of the Bible on the top part of the page. Then there's a line, and below that are all the variants of the text, right? Because there is no original manuscript. And so in these more scholarly editions, you get not only the kind of consensus of what the text probably is, but you get all the variants from various manuscripts historically. And that blew up a kind of biblical literalism, right? Maybe the first couple of weeks of seminary, that I was like, whoa, well, wait a minute. Can't really have biblical literalism if you don't have a kind of airtight text. But one other thing, the other thing was, I think key was that we had some professors, I think, who were willing to kind of open the aperture for us and had us reading, for example, James Cone, God is Black, right? And had us reading some African-American, Howard Thurman, other folks that, in addition to King, that I think really did shift. I'd never encountered Black theologians, right, until seminary.
I think what you're saying is a simpler way of what you're saying is that you grew up and you were taught, in this case, one truth, biblical literalism about in terms of religion, but also another truth, one truth about the history of Jackson, much less the country, I suppose. Yeah. Then you go to college and you're given, you call them variants, which we're not allowed to say anymore, except for in reference to COVID. But you're given alternatives to that. And then that's what happens. That's what happens when you leave that town, right? And so you're brought a challenge. You're starts to question kind of what you've grown up to believe. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think the real break for me was my last year of seminary. So I've been there 4 years to finish this Master of Divinity degree, and the end of the seminary was also when a kind of ultra-conservative, basically a fundamentalist wing of the already conservative denomination, kind of took over the board of trustees and fired the president, and locked him out of his office, escorted him off campus with armed guards. I mean, it was like a coup, and then started passing over professors, these very professors that were giving me exposure to African-American theologians, Latino theologians. Those professors got either fired or passed over for tenure, all in my last semester of seminary. And I was like, all right, I got to step back.
They came in and cleaned house.
Yeah, totally.
New regime.
Literally with armed guards. Yeah, at a seminary. I mean, it was there kind of unbelievable, surreal. Was there a specific incident or issue that maybe you saw boiling or coming, or was it a surprise? No, it kind of came out of nowhere. And it was really literally a set of trumped up, issues that was really just about getting this guy out and their guy in, and they were all, of course, guys.
Right. There's always that.
Yeah.
So when did you decide to, when did you start looking at race as it relates to religion? Because your books are so effing good and important and fascinating. I mean, I've been talking about learning about this stuff for years, just hosting a show and interviewing authors and experts. But in reading your stuff, there's so much more that I think that you uncover and focus on. And we're only beginning to tell this story about whites and Christians and the different denominations. When did you step into the racial element? Did something happen? Who got to you?
Well, I mean, again, it's been a very long journey, and kind of a painfully long, maybe even embarrassingly long journey,
right.
To get to this, But I mean, again, I think there were just little cracks in that, perfectly sealed up world that I grew up in that began to occur here, there, and then finally, pieces start falling out. I mean, I think it really has been a journey. One of the early ones, though, was actually still in seminary. So, I had a Baptist history professor who told me the truth about the beginning of our denomination. So the Southern Baptist Convention began in 1845. I knew that, but I always thought that term Southern. I was taught that term Southern just meant geography, right? We were the Baptists in the South. But it turns out that the true story is the reason why that word is Southern is there is because there was a group of churches in the South, Baptist churches in the South, that wanted to found a denomination where slavery and enslaving other people would be compatible with the gospel. Like, that's the genesis story of the Southern Baptist Convention. It was formed literally to allow churches to come together that were banded together, not just by their belief in Jesus or theological principles, but by their belief in white supremacy, and that enslaving other people was actually part of God's plan for human society.
And of course, again, that was the year 1845. And I think that you wrote, and this is part of the thing, I'm glad you mentioned this because I didn't know about this, certainly the specifics, that they had their interpretation of the Bible, which had certain parts taken out, I think.
Oh, right. Well, it's interesting. There's two things. Like in their battles with the abolitionists, they actually thought they had the upper hand, right? That they thought that the Bible read plainly. They had chapter and verse they could cite, right, in support of slavery, and that's actually true. Right? I mean, they actually thought they had the better biblical argument. But when it came to giving the Bible to enslaved people, they didn't want to give them the whole Bible, right? Because there's also other texts in there that don't just support slavery. So there's actually a Bible that is in the collection of Fisk University it's been dubbed kind of the Slave Bible, and it was put together by a British missionary society for use. The cover page literally says for use with enslaved people in the British West Indies. But what it does is it includes, for example, the book of Exodus, but only parts of it. Right. So it includes the enslavement of the Hebrew people in Exodus, but it actually excises their liberation
that's the
from the text. Right. So it includes in the New Testament, it includes slaves obey your masters from Ephesians, but it cuts out of Galatians. In Christ, there is no slave nor free, no Jew nor Greek. Like, the equality verses get literally chopped out. And that was the version of the Bible deemed appropriate, right, for the use of enslaved people, because it wouldn't give them a foothold for claiming liberation or freedom.
God, that's such an important detail. Really,
it's chilling. I mean, it just, I've seen the copy of it, and it's just chilling to see that.
So I can talk to you about your childhood and Southern Baptist stuff, and that period of time. I can talk to you about anything for hours and hours. I've been reading your work, and your Substack is fantastic and so relevant. But I just want to ask you about The End of White Christian America, which I guess published in 2019. Your more recent book now,
2016.
2016. Sorry, and White Too Long is your more recent book, White Too Long: The Legacy of White Supremacy in American Christianity. But first, The End of White Christian America. This, it's a provocative title, but you have, and your organization have, a ton of data here. So you can almost take the passion out of it and I think talk about the different denominations and who's winning or losing followers, and then the racial element of it all is fascinating and so important. What brought you to writing this book? Was it, again, a piece of data, a trend?
It was both a trend and kind of the cultural moment we were in. So that book came out before Trump really steps onto the national stage running for president. So it's before that. But I think one of the things that book does is it does tell you, it explains the stage onto which he walked, right, in 2016. And so one of the things I did notice in the trends is that there's been a lot of kind of, there was already angst about like anti-immigrant angst, anti-Black attitudes, anti-Muslim attitudes. They were all about kind of othering non-white people, non-Christian, people. And it just all that kind of heat around that. And part of it was about the kind of strong demographic changes we were encountering. And so at PRRI, we collect a lot of demographic data every year. We do about 100,000 interviews a year of Americans tracking attitudes and their kind of affiliations. So I had a big trove of data in front of me. And so I started looking. And one of the things I realized is that while some people have been writing about, like the census data, that, by 2040 or so, we're going to be a majority non-white country, and that's out there looming. But I realized that we had actually already crossed another threshold, and that is that we had moved from being a majority white Christian country to one that was no longer a white Christian country. And that culturally speaking, that was probably the more important threshold to set off a set of panic, set off some anger, that this idea of a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant country, right? We even have an acronym for that, WASP, that was really passing from the scene, and that it happened. We crossed this threshold during the presidency of our first African-American president. I think that's not incidental either. Like these things aren't causal, but the fact that they happened at the same time meant that white Christians were experiencing their kind of decline from being a majority demographic group at the same time that we had this symbolic presence in the White House of a non-white president that really, I think, made this very visible and real. And I think it did kind of stem this kind of visceral reaction among many white Christians in the country.
My daughter and I always have our best conversations, both my daughters, in the car, and we were driving by a church and we started talking about Christianity. And I realized, having grown up without any, we're not religious, that she just really doesn't have a great understanding of religion, much less Christianity. And then she started just getting really confused about what a Christian is. And I was trying to explain the different denominations, and I couldn't explain it very well. But you've got a tremendous amount of data in your book talking about how specifically white Christians had their alliances built over the years, or more importantly, divisions over the years. It was just mostly, in terms of religion and race, white Christian folks. And at one point, obviously, Protestants and Catholics for years at odds. We already talked a little bit about Baptists, and now we have to talk about Mormons. But let me make it easy for you, because I think you've used metaphors. But the kids today talk about text groups. Who is texting who gets kicked out of the group, and more importantly, and most specifically, how did the Mormons get invited into the text chat?
Yeah. Well, we could also ask the same, how did the Catholics get invited into the text chat too, right? Because they were excluded in the past as well. So,
well, the common thread might be, not to bury the lead, but the common thread might be white Christian text chat, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great metaphor, I think. And so, historically, what you would see is that there has always been a kind of Protestant Catholic split, right, among white Americans, and that has been, there have been people killed, right, over this split. This kind of Protestant Catholic. It's not just a kind of Irish troubles thing. We've had our own troubles here in the U.S. with a lot of anti-Catholic sentiment coming from white Christians. But inside the white Protestant world, there's basically two camps. One of them are the one we hear about all the time, white evangelicals, right? And then the other one are often called white mainline Protestants. And to kind of explain them, there's a kind of geographical and an ideological and a social class split. So basically, the evangelicals tend to be more heavily located in the South. They tend to be lower socioeconomic status historically. And then the mainline Protestants tend to be upper Midwest, Northeast, and a little bit up, or kind of more up the socioeconomic chain. And then white Catholics, heavily immigrant group with kind of 19th century immigrants, big influx of Catholics in the late 19th century. And these groups have typically been at odds. But one of the interesting things that has happened is as their numbers have shrunk, they have banded together and in ways that would have been almost impossible to imagine even 50 years ago. But what's happened is as they've shrunk and as they realize their kind of individual power is shrinking, those barriers between them have actually come down. And as you said, so if we're thinking about like the group chat, what used to be just a white evangelical group chat, right, is now including the main some portion of the main line, some groups of white Catholics, and as of late, I mean, I think particularly you saw it with Mitt Romney's run for president, even a group that had been considered a cult by many white evangelicals. Certainly, what I was taught about the LDS Church growing up, that barrier has come down too. But I think it's because as white Christians have gone, and the numbers are, I haven't said the numbers, but basically, if you go back to 2008. 54% of the country was white and Christian. That number today is 44, right? So just between 2008 and today, we've crossed the 50% threshold, but it's also been a 10-point drop in just a little bit over a decade. And that's been kind of accelerated. And so I think it's why people feel it, because it's been, even if they don't know the numbers, you can see it in the fewer number of young people showing up at church. You can see it in your communities with churches closing, those kinds of things. I think there's evidence that people see even if they don't know the numbers. They feel it.
I mean, you can see it in a church being turned into a pawn shop, a bar, or a bank,
restaurant. Yeah,
I suppose. Yeah, there's a lot that you can see, and the reaction to it is something that you and your organization have covered so much as well. I mean, you've got a lot to say about, and I think in the afterword of the paperback of White Too Long, you've got an edition now on the insurrection, and we can talk about the QAnon movement and the religious overtones there. So we could also continue to talk about the end of white Christian America, but I definitely want to get to your most recent book and even what you've been writing about at your Substack, which is so good. I've just subscribed to. It's the book is White Too Long: The Legacy of White Supremacy in American Christianity. I see you making a lot of appearances. I see you talk to a lot of civil rights leaders, black religious leaders, and others for this book. And those conversations are really important and super fascinating, because you're clearly grappling with and struggling with this legacy of white supremacy in American Christianity. Some people still reject and roll their eyes or are outraged that you would even equate the two. It's got to be tough for a lot of people to hear about this, and I have some empathy for them as they learn the truth. What is the truth?
Yeah, well, I should just say I don't really see this as a finger wagging book.
It's not.
I see this as a confessional book.
Yeah.
The word that James Baldwin often used about his own writing, it's kind of stayed with me. He's also a writer who's really changed my perspective. He talked about bearing witness, right? That we all have our little piece of the truth, right? And we try to bear witness to it as best as we can. And I think, for someone like me, who looks like me, who grew up so deeply in this world, and then realizing how steeped this world has been in unconscious and conscious commitments to white supremacy, undoing that has just felt like, it's part of my own personal journey, really. And so I've just tried to put my personal journey down on the page. And so it really is more of an insider's account than an outsider finger wagging account. And at the end of the day, I think what I hope is that, this isn't about destroying the church. It's actually about, for people who legitimately want to be Christian, about finding a way to do that. Because, I still consider myself Christian, and I certainly think, you can't be a disciple of Jesus and a white supremacist, and we're going to have to pick.
Well said. Powerful. Yeah. I mean, when you say we're going to have to pick, it seems like we have picked, and a lot of people, and that's your opinion. You can't be a Christian and a white supremacist. They would disagree, I think, vehemently. And how do that group, and maybe it's growing, I don't know, how do they justify it? How has it ever been justified to be a religious person who somehow thinks what they think in terms of a hierarchy, a structure of humanity?
Well, I think that's the kind of painful truth, I think, that we have to reckon with is that historically that has exactly been the case, right? There has been this I talk about it actually as kind of white supremacy getting over the generations embedded in the very DNA of what we have as white Christianity today. So it's really that deep.
Sure.
And so, we understand. I mean, it's actually the version of Christianity that even lands on American shores, right? It comes from Europe. You can trace it at least as back in explicit forms to the 15th century. So, we all know the date 1492, right? And many of us memorize like Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? We kind of know that number. And recently we've got another number. The 1619 Project has given us another number to kind of peg American history to. But a date not many Christians know much about is 1493, the very next year. And what's going on there is that is the year that the head of the Western Church, the Pope, declared this thing that came to be known as the Doctrine of Discovery, which was a white supremacist, European supremacist document that basically said, look, it was an official church declaration that said, if anyone from Europe encounters on their travels people who are not Christian, they can, with the blessing of the church, dominate those people, claim their land with the power of the state and the blessing of the church. That's an official church doctrine, right? And that's the version of Christianity that literally lands on the shores of North America. So it's that deep.
To be fair, they have since denounced the doctrine of 1493.
It's true. There's been some apologies issued and all of that, but right, but here's the thing, right? But how much of that runs through? I mean, I can give you right from my own church growing up. I mean, I also remember in Jackson, Mississippi, we tried to have just simply, this is in the early 80s. So even after the schools were integrated, our soccer team, which was integrated, wanted to have after the season, like during my teenage years, wanted to have after the season pool party. We booked the Moose Lodge in Jackson, Mississippi. And the day before, we got word that because we had black kids on our team, we couldn't use the pool. And we literally had to find another venue, right? And the Moose Lodge, the Rotary Club, the YMCA, I mean, all these things were kind of part of this kind of white Christian, milieu, right? And we had to find another place to have the end of the season party, but and it just wasn't questioned. And again, all that stuff about the Confederate imagery at my high school, my church had not one thing to say about that. When our schools were integrated, changing our entire social world as kids, right? I'm 7 years old. All of a sudden, I've got not just white kids around me, but like that's a moment you want to give a kid some framework, right, for understanding this social change in their world. Our church was absolutely silent, had nothing to say about why this is happening, what the history is, what we might, how we might understand, what's happening here. It just had literally nothing to say. And I think the reason it had nothing to say is because churches had been part of the structure supporting segregation in the South. And in fact, I often say this is true. Like, if white Christians at any point in our history had stood up and said no to white supremacy, had stood up and said no to slavery, had stood up and said no to segregation, it would have ended overnight.
If powerful white Christians.
Yeah, I mean, well, they had such a lock, right? I mean, white Christians had a lock on government. They had a lock. I mean, I give an example in Jackson, Mississippi. First Baptist Church in Jackson was not just kind of the tallest steeple in the state, but it was in the early 1960s. It was the home of Governor Ross Barnett, one of the most segregationist governors, and during the Civil Rights era, and it was also the home to the Hederman brothers, which ran all of the major media, the Clarion Ledger, WLBT News. And they had a lock on, and so they all went to church together. Ross Barnett was the governor, and he was also the head of the men's Sunday school program at First Baptist Church. And when he was elected governor, the church held a sanctification service for him, right, blessing his white supremacist run for governor. So it's just that embedded in the power structures. It has never been separate, and I think that's one of the things I've been trying to kind of hold up is how churches functioned as centers of power, that excluded African Americans and held the best things in society for whites.
It's a powerful thing that you just said. If white Christians had stood up at any point and said enough, no, it would have ended white supremacy, because I guess the converse, or another way of looking at it, is that it's their fault. It's white Christians' fault that we have these racial divisions and always have.
And I think here's the thing is that I think that's exactly right. That's going to bounce pretty hard against many white Christians who hear that, right? They're going to kind of go, I don't know. But here's the thing, right, is that white Christians always want to think of themselves, and I could say this ourselves, as, pillars of the community, salt of the earth, right? Kind of the things that make society better. As always want to claim that kind of influence, the positive influence. But when it comes to the negative stuff, want to say we had nothing to do with it. Right. And you can't say both. Right. And I think that the thing is that that's exactly right, because the churches love to think of themselves as the moral conscience of the community. Right. And I actually think there's some truth to that. But that means that when the moral conscience has failed, that responsibility has to fall on the steps of the church.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying about, the way I said it would bounce pretty hard. And I'd be happy to kind of understand or learn how to communicate that in a way that doesn't necessarily. I'm not looking to be provocative, whether it be on the podcast or more importantly in conversation with someone who still believes this stuff. And I think that's really important, how we talk to people. I'm learning that more and more here on the show, is I don't want to give up on human beings because they were brought up at a time and a place, or even now, only given, you look at these kids. In Lauren Boebert's photo yesterday, her kids holding those guns, and your heart just bleeds for those boys or the other guy, because they don't even know. They have no idea, when maybe one of them or all of them, when they're teenagers, like, I can't believe you put a machine gun in my hand like that. They didn't know better. Like, so I look at some adults as those kids. They didn't know better. They don't know better. I think about white supremacy a lot that way. You and I both grew up in pretty white worlds, it sounds like. And so I think that you have to have a certain type of empathy. So that's why I'm just talking for so long about how communicating is important, because I know that you believe this is just why you do this work. You want to connect people with all of this information that you've learned and that you're writing about and that your organization is polling. You want to get it out there. You don't want to turn them off. So let me just turn it back to you with a question about how we do communicate with these people. I mean, I'm sure they threaten you and say all kinds of things about you and your work. How do we best reach these people who it seems like we really have lost? I have a lot of listeners I know that have lost family members, and I know you know a lot about this. Yeah. Well, I think I thought a lot about this and in this last book. And so, I'm trained as a sociologist, and so I'm usually trained to kind of, what I'm comfortable with doing is writing in ways that are objective, and you kind of fly over at 30,000 feet and you describe the lay of the land, right? That's what academics get trained to do. But I thought a lot about this in this last book and decided to basically incorporate probably, a quarter of the book as memoir. And blending that with the research. And the reason why I did that is exactly this reasons, because I didn't think I could honestly do the research without kind of talking about my own experience, but it was also, I think, a way of reaching people. So in the book, the first word or the first, sentence in the book is written in the first person, has the word I in it. The last sentence in the book has the word us in it. And I, for people who look like me, I think it is an appeal by somebody who has lived in that world, who knows the world, who has some affection for that world. And honestly, I mean, there were, many times, like you said, that, emotions run high. And I mean, there were certainly times when I was even writing the book where I had to kind of step away from it for a little bit because it was just too painful to really, take in what I was seeing on the page as I was doing the research. But I think it's a journey, and I guess it's what I'm hoping. One way to do it is to tell our stories. And that's why I thought telling stories from my own family's history, from my own church, is important. I think it's a way of kind of connecting in a way that's not the kind of, kind of overtly analytical way of going about it, but it's about like, look, here's my experience, here's my story, here's our history, and inviting people into a conversation about what to do about it. I love that, and I appreciate it a lot, and the work that you're doing a lot. I've been thinking a lot lately about President Obama's speech. I feel like it was like the Philadelphia speech, or it was about Jeremiah Wright, and it was about his white grandparents or something. And it was I'm trying to look the quote up, and I can't find it. But the I could no sooner disown my whoever he was, And I think about that, what you're talking about with your family, with the people who grew up in your church, and a lot of listeners who they're often their kids. They've lost their kids down this QAnon or down this Trump cult. And they often say to me, Pete, I can't just write these people off. These are my kids. I love them. And they won't talk to me, but I love them. I don't hate them because they believe a lot of crazy, hate-filled stuff. I can't. How do you square that in thinking about that kind of quote? I can't sooner disown, because it does seem like we're quickly just writing people off and dehumanizing. And I do this all the time. Like, that guy's a white supremacist. Enough from him. Like, I do it all the time. And I think that there's some place for that, muting and blocking people. But you can't when they're your friends, your family, much less your neighbors in your community. I'm scared of what's happening.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, there's certainly good evidence that we're increasingly sorting ourselves into ideological camps, right? Even neighborhoods are becoming kind of more ideologically sorted, or sorted by party. Churches are becoming more sorted by party and ideology. You know, like in many towns, everybody knows, right? If you're a Democrat and you're Methodist, you go to that church. But if you're a Republican and Methodist, you go to that church, this other one across town. And so I think that's increasingly becoming the norm. So these, I think, connections like neighbors, families, long-term friends, and I've got a mix. I mean, like everybody, I have some friendships that have ended. And I've got some that we're on both sides desperately trying to hang on to, and I think it's really important. But I think, again, of saying, like, this is the journey I'm on. These are the kind of conclusions I'm coming to. This is the stuff I'm reading. There's a way of kind of just saying, like, this is where I'm at, right? And this is the journey I'm on because I care about you, because I'm in a relationship with you. I want to, like, be honest about that. I know that's not where you're at, but I think there's a humility, that we can use here that doesn't give up on what we think is true and what we think is important to say, or ground we think it's important. It's important to hold. And so it's not to say it's going to be without conflict, and it's not always going to be successful. God knows, but I think it's really important, because I think there are just fewer and fewer opportunities where people are in conversations with anybody who doesn't see the world the way they do. So in families and friends and neighbors are able to do that, even in little ways, I think it creates space that's not there otherwise. And for democracy, that space is really important.
Yeah. One just tiny thing that you mentioned to follow up on, it's not always going to be successful.
Yeah.
And you kind of have that reaction, like, God knows it's not. I think it's important to admit that about everything in life, because we're very committed to 100%, whether it's a diet or a friendship. But I do think it's really important, because I think that's where the giving up on people is, like, we put them in a category of, like, I'm not even trying. And I think it's important what you said. It's not always going to be successful. Maybe sometimes it is, though. Sometimes you're going to maintain that relationship. Sometimes maybe you're going to open a door or window for somebody to see the light around some kind of issue, certainly in dealing with race. And I'm sure you've had a tremendous amount of success, both with your organization, your books, and now your Substack, at enlightening people. I mean, you've got a piece today about the whole history of the baby Jesus and whiteness and blackness, and this painting being stolen, which is so important, this piece. So I wanted to get to that. I'm babbling here. There's two more questions I definitely want to ask you. 2020 insurrection in January 6th. We're about a month away. The QAnon influence, and I feel like there's a huge overlap with white Christians on QAnon, almost exclusively. It's hard to see the difference at some points. What in the new addition to the paperback version of your book, which I haven't gotten yet, and I cannot wait to get and read, although I heard a supply chain issue is preventing it from getting out, but you can get it.
Yep. Cokesbury has it. Cokesbury Bookstore. Yes.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Go get it there, everybody. So what can you just tell me a little bit about that new edition and what you say about the insurrection, how you think, where you think it plays in your work?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a piece on January 7th for Religion News Service that I got to rework a bit for the afterword of the new
which is another great
edition.
Sorry to jump in, don't interrupt, but I had Jack Jenkins on. Religion News Service is a great source of information. Just want to plug that where you also contribute. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll second that. And Jack in particular has been all over these issues and really important reporter. In fact, on the issue of the the Catholic University of America, the painting still in there. I mean, I picked that up because I first saw Jack writing about it at Religion News Service. So it's a really important.
Yeah, he's great.
Really important source. So I wrote a piece January 7th, and then was able to kind of rework it a little bit. And the thing that I was struck by, and I know Jack and other religion reporters too, was that got underreported in the mainstream news were all the religious symbols there, right? So there weren't just, it wasn't just the sea of Trump flags and Confederate flags, but, in one image that there was like the breached Senate chamber, you see the Confederate flag being marched through the halls and into this breached Senate chamber. And then there's another image that where the Christian flag, which is, if you're Protestant, you probably saw this flag up on the platform on one side of the pulpit. Like in our church growing up, we had the Christian flag on one side, the American flag on the other, right on either side of the pulpit. And it's a white flag with a blue canton and a red cross in the corner, march right alongside those Confederate white supremacist symbols and Trump supporting symbols. And so, I think we have to take that really seriously. And this threat, that is not just partisan, but it really is about supporting, autocracy, undermining democracy, and violence. I mean, that's the thing, right? Not just kind of strong arm tactics in a metaphorical way, but literally being willing to pick up weapons and engage in acts of violence. And when we pulled on this, I mean, it's extraordinarily difficult to pull on, as you might imagine, because it's kind of this swirl of wild beliefs, but even when we asked questions that were about some of the most extreme elements of it, like, do you believe that there is a group of Satan-worshiping pedophiles, right, that's secretly controlling the government? Do you believe that there's going to be this sweeping away of purge, basically, of people in power where the rightful people will be magically kind of installed? And then finally, do you believe that things are so bad that I think the way we worded the question was things have gotten so off track that true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save the country, right? And we have on that question more than a quarter of white evangelicals, for example, saying yes. That they can imagine. There's 30% of Republicans, a little more than a quarter of white evangelicals saying they can imagine, harming or killing their fellow citizens. That's pretty far afield from turn the other cheek, in the New Testament. But that's where we are.
Real quick, palate cleanser, your favorite dessert?
Key lime pie.
Oh, good man. I like that. Oh, man. That's good. All right. Well, I love talking to you. This is so important. My last question is just about the sweet baby Jesus, and the whiteness versus the blackness. And by the way, we probably could. I wonder if you can connect white Jesus to white Santa at all, because it's that time of year. Anyway, you have a really thoughtful, most recent post. Was like so impressed by this at your Substack. Advent, race, and the intimacy of incarnation. Why we must see beyond a white baby Jesus. I don't read through full articles as much as I used to, but I definitely read through this whole piece, and it's filled with nuggets of information and super important and super relevant for this time of year. Great work. Could you just tell me a little bit about it?
Thanks. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, I got onto this because I was already thinking about Advent and the kind of themes around Advent, and been thinking about these nativity scenes that we see popping up, in church lawns, and then I did a quick Google search and realized that almost every image that pops up, Jesus, Mary, Joseph, they're all white, and so I think, that's one counterfactual to the biblical witness, where he's, Jesus is a Middle Eastern Jew, right? Very unlikely he's going to look like Botticelli's, mother and
right.
And Christ child painting. And what difference that makes. And what happened was this painting at Catholic University got stolen that was Pieta, which is a classic form of Mary holding a crucified body of Jesus. And there had been a painting done by Kelly Lattimore, who's a St. Louis-based artist, where they were with brown skin, and Jesus bore a likeness to George Floyd. And it was actually drawn as a way of mourning George Floyd. And just to be clear, it's a classic piece of art.
with the white Virgin Mary and baby Jesus.
That's right.
And the new version, I think, was it commissioned?
It wasn't commissioned. It was just done by this artist, and then Catholic University got a copy of it to hang on their law school.
And you include it in your Substack, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful painting, but it depicts the Virgin Mary as black and the baby Jesus as George Floyd.
Yeah, that's right. And it was hung on the Catholic University Law School wall, and then there was a complaint lodged, and a conservative student group then kind of filed, got a petition together, and then someone stole it essentially off the wall. It was so offensive that someone stole it. And to Catholic University's credit, they did they had a smaller copy at another place on campus. They did rehang it, but then they refused actually to even acknowledge that it was George Floyd, even though the artists so explicitly. So even in there, it was kind of this half step, right, by the administration of Catholic University. And I thought it was such a missed opportunity. Catholic University is a pontifical university. That means it's the only one directly under the Vatican. It's also the only institution in the country founded by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. So it's an academic institution. And there's also examples in the Vatican of them educating people about art that has Jesus portrayed as black. Like the Vatican itself has done that. And yet Catholic University wasn't really willing to go down that road and try to kind of protect their white flank by pretending that they didn't know it was George Floyd. And so I just take that as a jumping off point to think about the importance of being able to think about the incarnation, that is God becoming human, right, in Christian theology, as not just being white, right? We have to have a more expansive and inclusive way of imagining. None of us know we don't have portraits. None of us know what Jesus really looked like, but the sense of incarnation, that God becoming one of us, the us has to mean everyone.
What does all this have to do with Advent?
Yeah, well, I think, one way that I think white supremacy creeps in is with Jesus being white. And I think the turning point for me on that point, and why I see that is so important, is the only image in the book that in White Too Long, the book that I have that's not a chart, is a drawing of a white Jesus. And it was drawn by Dylan Roof, who was the white Lutheran Christian who gunned down 9 African Americans while they were at Bible study at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston. And for him, that white Jesus was a white supremacist symbol. And I asked myself, well, what would happen if Dylan Roof had grown up in a Lutheran church that had a black Jesus up on their wall or in their stained glass windows? Would he have so easily been able to reach for white Jesus as a defense of his violent acts? And I think the answer to that's no. So it matters, it deeply matters in how white Christians are formed, how they think about, and the incarnation is in Christian theology, the connection to God, right? This kind of connection to a savior. So it's really important that Savior not be depicted as white.
You're a real smart guy. Only. You're a real smart guy, very well educated guy, doing excellent work. But I'm always more interested and attracted to, especially men who, within their scholarly work like yours, become vulnerable, as you have in your books and as you write in your most recent Substack. You say, I confess that growing up, I would have had a difficult time thinking about Jesus, the light coming into the world, as a baby with black or brown skin. You actually write that. And you go on to talk about it. And that is why your work is I think so exceptional, because of how vulnerable and honest you're being. And so just a final note on that. Why? Like, why is that important? Specifically, not what you're writing there, but why is it important, do you think, for you to be so transparent and honest and vulnerable in your work?
I think for one thing, I think it's part of the journey I'm on. And so, I think when I write, one of the best things writers can do is be as honest as they can. I mean, we all have, a candle we're holding in front of us, and it casts light, as far as we can see. And I think our responsibility is to bear witness, and that term that with Baldwin, to that piece of things that we can see. I'll give Baldwin another, shout out here that one of the things that always stay with me is he has said, kind of famously said, look, not everything that can be faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it is faced. And so I think holding this light out as far as I can see, being honest about my own journey, it is important, because I really think in so many ways, the white Christian church in this country is lost. and it's literally lost itself because of this commitment to white supremacy. And if it's going to find itself again, the only way to do that is to really face this really troubling history.
Well, you're doing very important work. I do, however, think it's a little much for listeners who couldn't see it, that Robbie was holding up an actual candle during the metaphor, and how he had that handy, and a kerosene lamp now. And I made it all up, but it's a perfect metaphor. And I appreciate you shining that light on me, and I'm psyched to have you on today. And I hope that you'll come back, because I really enjoyed this. And I've even more sometimes I enjoy, during the prep, reading your work and learning so much, and your writing has been great, and watching some of your other talks. So psyched to have you. Keep up the good work. You keep shining that light, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again soon.
Oh, thanks. I'd love to anytime. It's been a great conversation. So yeah, thanks for the show.
Man, how about that? Was that a good interview or what? I learned so much from preparing to interview him, and I loved the conversation and his answers to my questions, which I at times was smart to keep succinct. And I did a nice edit of it for you. Robert P. Jones, PRRI.org. His books, get them. All the information, of course, is in the show notes for that interview and every interview, as well as all my social media stuff and other thoughts and things. So check that out and let him know that you heard him. If you're on Twitter, at Robert P. Jones, say this is the first time he's ever on the show, and I definitely want to have him on again. So please tweet him. I'll wait. Go tweet him at Robert P. Jones. So many of you do that so often, and I should have a party just for you people who are constantly promoting the show. And you got your Hap Connors and your Kim Nyborgs and your Pete Coes and your Tina Winsets, and who am I missing? Several others of you who are constantly promoting the show. Thank you very, very much for doing that on social media. It definitely matters. And now it's time to get to my second guest on today's show, it's also a really great and interesting and raw and honest conversation with the co-creator of The Daily Show. She's now doing a new talk show on YouTube with her organization Abortion Access Front, called Feminist Buzzkills Live, with a great group of women that she's working with all the time. She's on Twitter at Lizz Winstead, and you should check her out in Minneapolis. She does this every year in Minneapolis, December 29th, 30th, and 31st. She'll be performing. You can go to find all this information on her Twitter feed or LizzWinstead.com. She was in Washington, D.C. when the court heard the arguments on the abortion case last week, and we had a great conversation about it all and where we are as a country, where the movement is, and she's frustrated for sure, and we have to help. We have to do more, and I'm determined to do it after this conversation because she's my friend, and I told her I would. Lizz Winstead, ladies and gentlemen, back on the show. Here we go now. Lizz Winstead is here, and she's just out of the clink, the big house. You've been arrested.
I know.
Are you?
I went to white lady jail.
What happened?
So my organization, Abortion Access Front, and myself, wanted to go down to. We go to D.C. for every Supreme Court. We try to make noise. We try to, just do actions in the streets. And we did a massive action with, if you saw any media, you saw huge Supreme Court justice heads that were lined up. That was us. And we did the People's Supreme Court, where we had people who've had abortions, people who fund abortions, and people who provide abortions sort of testify before the court in the street. And so then we did a march and just sat in the middle of the road until the cops came and got us. There was literally 44 of us, and there was 100 cops. And just to let you know how frustrating this all was. I mean, I knew I was going to get arrested because I sat in the street. But up the street, where the anti-abortion protesters were, there was at least 3 people who were at the insurrection that I have videotape of, who walk free. And it was maddening to watch the women sit, to watch this massive police presence, but then also people were like, I'm so proud of you, so brave. And I was like, I knew nothing was going to happen to me. I'm a white person. I was not ever at any point afraid that something's going to happen to me. They put us in outdoor pens and they held us so long out that they were like, do you guys need to go to the bathroom? And we're like, yeah. And so then they just escorted us into the Russell Senate offices to go to the bathroom, as opposed to the last time there was a massive rally in Washington where they stormed the Capitol. We were invited in to use the restroom.
Did you commit any vandalism there inside the Capitol?
I did not commit any vandalism inside the Capitol, but we did try to do a projection onto the Supreme Court that was promptly shut down within moments. The cops were like, nope. And we were like, wow.
How many organizations were in D.C. outside the court of this argument for this argument? How many kind of what language are we using? I want to use pro-human women's reproductive rights.
How about abortion advocates?
Abortion.
Because there's nothing wrong with abortion. There's nothing wrong with saying abortion. There's nothing wrong for advocating for abortion.
You're not actually allowed to say abortion on this show.
Okay, then I gotta go. My hat says abortion on your show.
That's okay. That's fine.
No, so I have to tell you, Pete, it was a shit show. It was a shit show because I'm just going to say it, that the activism around abortion has been timid, has not been, it is dire. We're about to lose Roe v. Wade. And we did not plan accordingly. I think way too many people who aren't on the ground as much as Abortion Access Front are every day do not understand the profundity of the anti-abortion movement and how dangerous they are, and that they have ties to militias and white supremacy and the anti-abortion, and the insurrectionist movement. And so we weren't in charge of planning the official rally. And when we got down there to do our actions, the anti-abortion movement had taken both sides of the street, had blocked off the entire Supreme Court so that the pro-choice rally was held behind the anti-abortion extremists who were using bullhorns screaming, these people want the constitutional right to put babies in blenders. These whores are going to have all the whole time. And our side has flowery signs that are like, my choice. It's like, no. That is not the battle we're fighting. That is not these people are extremist terrorists, and they're in charge of they want to be in charge of our bodies. They get people elected to state legislatures, statewide office. They're not fringe. They are when Marjorie Taylor Greene says we are the base, this is who she's talking about.
Yes.
This is who she's talking about.
Yes.
And it was
as opposed to the fringe. I know the quote you're talking about. I played it in the podcast. She said, we're not the fringe. We're the base. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, knowing that these people there was thousands, we were outnumbered 10-1.
Really?
Yes.
Now, can I just say what I've been wanting to say, and I can only say it to you? Because I know that you'll scold me or you'll reject me, whatever. I'm somewhat surprised with a certain lack of energy in the kind of new feminist movement. And this seems to be evidence of it. You're there, you're organizing, you created a whole fucking organization. You're so committed to this with all of your energy and resources for years now, but I don't know. I feel like I want to see more, and I feel so uncomfortable saying that as a dude. But so I only say it to you. I'm going
to say to you as a dude, and I really love you, but I almost want to say fuck you because Pete, I'm so sick of dudes who care who don't show up. Where were you? Why didn't you come?
Fair enough.
Come. You know what? The anti-abortion side has so many men who help do all this shit and who you don't need to fucking speak. We need people to hold massive signs. We need people to stand with us. We need people to understand that and care and actually say, just because I can't get pregnant doesn't mean that I don't completely see the terrorizing erosion destroying the lives of people I love. Why weren't men there? Where was everybody? Where are the progressives ever? They're never there. They're just never there. When we organize, we send emails, I beg, and I beg. And we just, if we don't, what it looks like, what the optics are all the time is people, families, men, women, children coming out to support, and I'm air quoting the fuck out of this, life. And the other side is women who want to kill babies. And so unless everybody decides that this is a human right that they will go and defend and be there with, so that if we're supposedly, if 70% of Americans supposedly think Roe v. Wade should be the law of the land, then people need to stand up for it. It's not enough to just say, that's terrible.
Well,
that's nuts.
There's a disconnect there. I take your scolding and I will show up the next place you tell me to be at.
Okay. I'm just saying, like, that you are a good guy. And men say this to me constantly. And then when I say, where were you? They're like,
well, I was super busy on another independent action, napping. Like, no, I like what you're saying. And I more importantly, like, I just keep thinking about, because I don't have anything else, The Handmaid's Tale and The Commanders. And like, when you say that there's all these men organizing on the other side, I watched the interview with the Mississippi governor over the weekend on Meet the Press. That motherfucker is organized and crazy, ready to criminalize abortion. Like, Gilead, let's go.
26 other states. There's 26 other governors who cannot wait. They're not all men, but they cannot wait. And I think that's it. You know, when you look at what's going on is like the shoulders, everything at the end of the day falls on the shoulders of Black women because they just always have. And so it's just like they show up, you know, it's like for everything, all the time, every time. And it's not as I scold you, Pete, you know, and I'm like, where are the men? I mean, I really do feel that. But also, like, how is it that all the women that voted for Biden 10 months ago in Virginia just went and voted for, you know, mini-me Trump? Because their lives didn't change in 9 months. There's a fickle nature to privileged people that feels very disconcerting. It's like they don't know how process works. They don't know how anything works. I want my change now. And, you know, it's pretty disconcerting. So, I mean, like, I'm just like a little bit ragey, which you probably didn't expect.
No, but, I don't stop it. First of all, my daughter had an
abortion.
Not yet, but I've got her. I get jokes I can't make. It's her life, not mine. It's so hard as a comic to, like, I have to ask her for permission to every joke that I say into a microphone. She never says no, but I don't do it without her asking. I was going to say she has a manicure appointment and it got canceled and she's mad. Like the point you're making about privilege and wanting and getting things pretty quickly, like instantaneously. And so changing your opinions on politics and activism, and it's so convenient and so easy. So what are you asking for? Like, I mean, you already kind of touched on it, but given the fact that what we saw happen last week at the Supreme Court, pretty much every scholar across the board is predicting the same thing. What are they predicting?
That Roe is going away. Robin Marty has written an incredible book. She's an author. She's an amazing activist called, A Post-Roe America. And I encourage everyone to read it. It's a great book. And she moved from Minnesota to Alabama, and she is, really decided to go where it's hard. And she's helping run a clinic and a fund.
Robin Marty?
Uh-huh.
Never heard of her. I'll interview her.
She's so great. You must interview her. But it's, what I'm saying is this is going to take away the rights of over 100 million people to access care. And it's going to force people into pregnancies. And when somebody tells you that they no longer want to be pregnant, believe them and honor that, because forcing parenting on anyone and forcing pregnancy on anyone is terrifying. For Amy Coney Barrett to say, well, people can just have a baby and drop it off at a firehouse like it's an episode of This Is Us. Like deciding that pregnancy doesn't harm a body, that pregnancies aren't dangerous, and that people should be forced to be potting soil. I want to be really clear with your listeners is that adoption isn't the alternative to abortion. Adoption is the alternative to someone who doesn't want to parent. Abortion is the alternative to someone who doesn't want to be pregnant. And those two things are very real. And we need to really think about that. And so, no one owes someone a kidney, an organ, or a child if somebody else would like one in their lives. Sorry, that's just not how it works. We're not just conveniences for people who don't have. And that's sort of what Amy Coney Barrett said. And it was really disheartening to hear that just framed in a way that was so cavalier.
Yeah.
Not to mention, why don't you talk to some firehouses who really are into putting out fires and not taking care of infants, or just like these drop-off places. I mean, let's all go drop babies off at her house. Okay. Can we do that? I just want to mail her a bunch of rubber fetuses.
Did you see that guy that used a rubber arm for the vaccination?
That guy's my hero. That's next level.
You got to respect.
Gaslighting. You are so dumb, Steve Austin. What are you doing? That is so insane. I think he brought his also rubber brain.
Yeah. He wins.
Joe Rogan doctor coat.
He should sell those. Oh, that's great merch.
Joe Rogan doctor coat.
What other? I was going to ask you about any other arguments that were made at the Supreme Court last week that, or questions asked that you wanted to comment on, and you brought up the Amy Coney Barrett. Who else?
I mean, there was a couple things. John Roberts, who is so desperate to not have his legacy be meet the man who shredded the Constitution, that he was saying, is 15 weeks, it's so close to 24 weeks. Is there really any difference? And it's bitch, yes. First of all, the fact that this keeps coming up is just shows that people fundamentally don't understand how pregnancy works, how pregnancies develop. Also, why people have abortions later in pregnancy. Oftentimes it's because our country has created such a fucked up way to access abortion in early pregnancy that you have to raise money. You can't use your insurance. The closest clinic to you is states away. You don't have childcare. You have to wait 24, 48, 72 hours before you can have the service. You can't take time off work. You're a single parent. There's a myriad of blockages to just access abortion. You know, and when people say things like, how come they don't have later abortions in Europe? And I was like, because you can get an abortion at fucking Chick-fil-A in Europe. You can get pills anywhere. You can get an abortion. If you want your abortion, you just go get your abortion. And the later abortions in Europe are reserved for people who have very problematic pregnancies that are endangering the person who's pregnant. And so that's when they have them. So don't act like, well, Europe's very moral. No, Europe is fucking like crazy, having a great time, passing out all the birth control, and then saying, like, you need an abortion? Go get an abortion. And then take the rest of your day to go get some lunch or have your nails done.
And you'll have time because you have childcare for your other kid, or universal pre-K, or paid leave, or universal health care. I mean, and
also you learned about birth control and sex when you were in school. I mean, like, you listen to these people. It's like, sex is dirty, sex is evil, sex is dangerous, sex is wrong. Save it for the one you love. Like, what are you talking about? What is happening?
Do you think? I just want to ask you about my daughters and their sexuality, and I just have to wait.
No, have them ask me. You stay out of their lives.
I have to press stop. I know, but I gotta
listen to me.
Go ahead.
Listen to me.
Go ahead.
You can talk to them about sex and let them cringe, and you do it one time. And then you have trusted people in your life who they go to. And I said this to my sisters. I said, has your daughter ever, because my sisters were all like, my kids are going to come to me. And I'm like, maybe they're not. Has your daughter ever walked out of a dressing room and said, do I look sexy in this? The answer is no, because daughters want to have independence, want to be, children, but also are coming into their own sexual age.
Too late. Talk about
Parents aren't always the people that the kids want to go to. Sometimes they want privacy.
I talk about it with them a lot.
And do they talk to you about birth control? And what do they say?
We talk about it all.
Really? And they're comfortable?
In detail. Yeah, because I started early and I plowed through it. I think, I wonder if you'll make an exception for a certain type of comedian. There was this weird thing where, like, there were things in my act that were about sex and sexuality, and I hate that men can't talk about their daughters. And my best friend's a pediatrician, and he always talks about his sex with his kids, and because they ask. And so I've been talking about it with my daughters, and I just refuse to allow it to be weird. I don't force them to talk about.
I bet they initiate it though, right? You're not like walking in, bringing it up. Like, I know people who I brought my daughter a vibrator and I put it on her bed. It's like, you know what? You just sometimes don't let somebody bring it up to you and then be super open about the conversation. I think, unless it's the initial conversation about learning about sex, I think that's fine. But I just think bringing it up as a topic, like, hey, how's the fucking going? Like, no. Like, you know what I mean? That's what I'm talking about. Like parental, concern and sex and relationships and emotion, all of that is parenting. It's when it goes into that friend way of looking at it, where you're talking about it and it's like, hey, you're gonna go out and get some dick, no, don't. I feel like that's not the conversation.
I haven't said that, but I will tell you exactly what I said as soon as I press stop. So
okay, great.
It's their story, not mine, right? So
seems like you've inserted yourself into it.
I have, but it's not for, no doubt about it, but it's not for me to tell it while I'm recording is all I'm saying.
No, please don't.
Yeah.
Please don't. Your daughters would be mortified.
Yeah. So getting back to the issue in the Supreme Court, was there anything else that was said that you want to react to? Because I like your reaction in addition to, the con law scholar. I like the activist. Yeah.
I mean, I think Kavanaugh.
Now, you're a big Kavanaugh supporter from the start.
Oh, the amount of shots that Tobin and Squee and Brett and I were doing. Epic. Just epic.
Squee.
You know, I mean, I know Squee. When you go back and watch the Kavanaugh hearings and he's crying, 65 women wrote letters saying, "You're a good man. You're a good man." It's so gross.
Yeah, Amy Chua.
You know, he was trying to say, you know, and the point that he was trying to make was slightly confusing to me, but he was like, we're not in the business of being pro-choice or pro-life. You know, people don't look to the court for, it's like, since when?
Well,
are you not in the business of anything, you political hack?
Can I give you my interpretation?
Yeah.
He was talking about precedent, and he talked about, you know, first of all, in his confirmation hearing, he basically said, you know, it's settled law. You know, we're not going to overturn precedent. And then last week he was like, named all of the cases that have been overturned. But Liz, you mentioned this earlier, and I think this is the most important point. This is different because those cases were not taking away a right. In this case, they're taking away a right. That's why this is so much different than all of the list of precedents that had changed on other things, like on, you know, slavery and women's suffrage. Do I have it right? Is that what you heard?
You're exactly correct. He listed every case that was overturned because it was wrong, you know, and this is it wasn't taking away a right. It was granting a right.
Right.
And this is taking away a right. And, you know, Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett said Roe was precedent, but wasn't super precedent because it keeps coming up. But Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, John Roberts, they all said that Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. And, you know, Susan Collins can eat a dick because she was the one who was like so much like, I talked to him and he told me that Roe v. Wade is law of the land. And if Susan Collins would have Googled anything, she would have seen that it was Brett Kavanaugh who wrote the dissenting opinion when that undocumented minor was seeking abortion through all legal means. She had her own money. All she needed to do was have somebody open the door so she could go and get her abortion. And it was Brett Kavanaugh who said the state shouldn't be facilitating abortion because they had to open the door of the fucking facility and let her go have her abortion. She had a lawyer that was going to take her there, get her abortion.
That would never, ever be the issue if you looked at it like healthcare.
Right, ever.
Like
no,
what would be
all the time. Incarcerated people who are detained, they get health care all the time. And Brett Kavanaugh, Susan Collins' boyfriend, was like, I mean, it's just so disgusting that this is how we live and with head in the sand. And she's like, I guess I'd codify Roe v. Wade. You know, I mean, there are things we can do. The Senate could pass the Women's Health Protection Act. You know, people need to be paying attention to their state legislatures and not electing these cretins and their governors so that these laws don't get passed in the first place. You know, making sure that your Secretary of State is not some lunatic who's not going to certify an election. Like, this shit matters. So, and also just coming out and standing with people and showing what the majority of people who support abortion access in America looks like. It has to be families. It has to be, you know, all genders. It has to be everyone out saying that I value the fundamental freedoms of all people. And the 14th Amendment says that you cannot intrude upon those freedoms. And the anti-abortion side is actually trying to flip the script on the 14th Amendment and giving it to the fetus. Because let's be very clear, Pete. Every single time you give a fetus a right, you are taking the right away from a woman or a person who can get pregnant. The only way you can give fetuses rights is by taking them away from people living outside of the womb. That's it.
Geez, I'm not even sure I've quite heard it put that way. And That's the game.
That's the game. That's the game.
Giving the fetus the point where they can drive in HOV lanes.
Yeah. You know what? What the hell is that about? I mean, and this is the whole thing. When we talk about personhood, like there's very hard conversations that we need to have. First of all, pregos in can I just drive in the HOV lane if I just had unprotected sex and I'm just loaded up with a bunch of sperm? Who knows? There's a baby in there. I don't know. That's like, I am just like cruising. I don't know. Like, are you going to then start child support? Does life begin at broken condom? Like, is that when child support starts? Oh, the condom broke. Give me money. Like, what kind of plan do you have here? But personhood, if you have laws where somebody gets in a car accident and hits a pregnant person and they lose their pregnancy, there's states where you can be prosecuted for manslaughter for that. Right? So that means that you're giving personhood to a pregnancy. When we talk about bodily autonomy and we talk about what that is, it's like that part is very, very hard, because it's like, why would that be? If we can abort something that is clearly, science says, is potential life, is not a person, is potential life at any stage, then why do we have these why are we criminalizing miscarriage sometimes? Why are we having HOV lanes for pregnant people? That's literally saying Roe v. Wade isn't the law of the land. Personhood is the law of the land, and that people begin at conception.
Right,
and that just isn't real.
That's the game, and that's the game I think is
the game.
Pretty
and nobody wants
fair
to talk about it. We never want to have conversations about like who it harms, who it affects, because they sound cruel and they sound terrible and it makes us sound callous. But like, I want a nation where we value all pregnancy outcomes, where if somebody's 15 and gets pregnant and says abortion isn't for me, and I'm 15 and I want to have this baby, we should be a society that helps that person raise that kid. And we should also be a society for somebody who is 35 and has 2 kids and says, I cannot have another kid. I don't have the capacity for it, and I need to have an abortion. We should honor that too. Until we decide that somebody's pregnancy outcomes we value them all because they've made a decision, because for whatever reason, it's a mess. And we're giving the government some sort of agency over us. And that is not only unconstitutional, it reduces us out of humanity and into chattel status. And that's just true.
Can I ask you a petty question?
Yeah.
Petty political question.
How much do I weigh?
Huh?
How much do I weigh? What are you going to ask me? No, you can ask me a petty political question.
Well, I do need to mention my band, Loaded Up with Sperm, is playing this Friday, and we're playing our hit single "Broken Condom." And
excellent.
So I hope everybody comes out.
No, at the Weenie Garage?
What's that?
Are you playing at the Weenie Garage?
We're playing at the Lost Horizon in Syracuse.
Okay, great.
So my go-to. No, my petty question is one more about politics. I just want to get your take on it. And by the way, if you think this is a bullshit question and you hate it being given any air, then please don't be shy. Not that you are.
Oh, I'm so shy. I told you to fuck off 3 minutes into the interview, and I'm still here.
In June, there will be a decision on the arguments heard last Tuesday. The question a lot of people are debating is if Roe is overturned, which predictions are it will be, what will that do to the women's movement? What will that do to Democrat progressive movement and the midterms? Shitty question? Good question? Humble it with an answer? Not the question.
I think it's always a good question because we are not prepared for what that world looks like. Just to give you an indication of what the world is right now.
Yeah. Paint it.
With this Texas ban still in effect, that affects 27 million people. of reproductive age, right? It's 27 million, right?
Currently in effect.
Currently in effect. Not being able to get an abortion ostensibly.
How's that vigilante part of it going?
Oh, I think it's really great. I think that any kind of pussy comitatus that's just out there hunting down people, helping, feels great. I feel like deputize any rando to just decide to like do it, you know?
I feel the worst. I feel the worst for the Uber driver.
I literally, here's the thing that was interesting. When that case went before SCOTUS and Clarence Thomas, you know, who's asked 6 questions in his entire fucking tenure report, says to the Solicitor General of Texas, who also wrote the law, he's very invested in everyone's vagina. I mean, I can't even believe people can carry pregnancies. There's so many politicians in uteruses. It's like, how is there even room to gestate a pregnancy?
What's crazy about that is I was having sex with my wife, who of 20 years, and I was like, what is going on? And several politicians were in there. And she had no idea.
Yelling, you know, they're just running away from ice storms. You know, they're doing a lot of things in there. Trying to stay warm. Ted Cruz, that's what Ted Cruz is doing. He just wants to stay warm after the ice storm, after his ticket to Mexico got revoked. Anyway, what was I saying?
Clarence Thomas, Texas case.
Clarence Thomas, thank you. So he asked the solicitor, he said, so why do you think it's constitutional to deputize someone to, you know, harm, to arrest somebody who's helping somebody else get an abortion? And this douchebag said, and I'm paraphrasing, I think I've been paraphrasing pretty much the whole time. This douchebag said, well, sometimes when people hear about somebody else wanting to have an abortion, it's as painful to them as it is the person having the abortion.
Well, that's fair.
And Clarence Thomas actually basically said, get the fuck out of here with that, bitch. What, you know, no. Like, he was like, really? So what I know, when the Texas case comes down, and I do believe that Texas, they won't uphold Texas, not because of the abortion part, but because of the bounty hunting part, which is sad. Don't think as a victory. It's just because the hammer's going to come down on the 15-week ban out of Mississippi. But like, you know, all these hot takes also that are going around. There was a New York Times just indulging, and so is the Washington Post. Crackpots. This woman wrote, maybe the Texas law is just a really good first step.
Wait, as editorials, as columns?
Yeah, as editorials. Maybe it's a good first step because at 6 weeks, a child begin developing a jaw. And I was like, a jaw? Maybe if you're Jay Leno, there's no jaw on a 6-week-old fetus. It's the size of a lentil. There's no jaw there. It would be all jaw.
But where was that in the Washington?
The New York Times. The New York Times op-ed.
Jesus. That's
like,
rough for me.
And then the Washington Post put some massive article about this maternity ranch in Texas where they lure in women who are looking for abortions and talk them out of it, and then have them do free labor on their ranch for a year, as long as they adhere to the Christian values and marriage is between one man and one woman and all this other shit. And I'm sorry, free labor for a year and indoctrination into religion. We have names for that shit. And I think we abolished it in 1865.
I'm sorry, but they're actually a sponsor. Mary's Maternity
Ranch, the Hidden Valley Ranch.
The Hidden Valley Ranch.
Maternity Ranch.
Reminds me I have to do my live read.
Oh. Hello. From the Hidden Valley Maternity Ranch. You can get your free pajamas or whatever you
There must be some kind of bonus, some attraction to.
But I mean, and what's happening so much, and I think this is another reason why I get so mad at all the hot takes from people who are just discovering all of the hidden horribleness around abortion bans, you know, and a lot of our friends who are progressives I don't know where they've been. I don't know how much cotton they've had in their ears, but like, if you'd only had people writing more columns for you about this, or you had people on shows more to talk about it, you wouldn't be surprised when these things happen. Because what happens is people write these editorials and people write articles and they do featured things and they sound like college freshmen who got one course in something and then they write a piece and then they wonder why people are mad. It's like, we've been saying this. And also there's so many layers that are extra that you don't even understand. You know, we were begging people. We have a whole research arm of Abortion Access Front that is dedicated to tracking anti-abortion extremism and finding the intersections between the white supremacists and the you know, militias. And because of our research, we were able to identify 30 anti-abortion extremists at the insurrection, footage, all this stuff, and reported them to the FBI. I wrote an op-ed about it. I did not get one media hit, you know, like no one reached out to say, well, that's interesting. Wow. It's like, yeah, they're there. And I see one of these monsters, you know, featured on Meet the Press. It's like, look at the Christian extremists who are out there changing the way they do business. And it's like, you didn't say extremist, I said it, but like this guy, Ken Peters, who's like a literal monster, and they're normalizing this stuff. And it's really a problem. So we need to be vigilant because in June, what's going to happen is first of all, there's a couple things we need to just in our own vernaculars. There's no abortion debate. There is people who are trying to end access to abortion. It shouldn't be up for debate whether or not someone can have an abortion. So stop acting like there is a legitimate other side. There is not. 2, there are no safe states because the states who actually are providing access to care right now, I didn't even get to my point I was going to make about Texas, which I'll make now, is the states that are surrounding Texas right now have 6 to 8 week waiting times to access care because of the overflow from Texas. People are traveling all the way to Maine from Texas to get abortions. Every state that provides access to care is taxed. There's not new clinics opening up. And so anything that you consider or think of as a safe state, and I'm flying my air quotes around like a goddamn cigarette. If 26 states ban abortion, no one's going to have access to care. There's going to be overload. And
meaning because those people who want abortion in the 26 states where it's been criminalized or banned are
going to have to go someplace else. That's that's like around 127 million people. Listen to me. 127 million people are going to be potentially looking. It's time for a segment we called Another Ignorant Medical Question with Pete Dominick. Okay. Oh, good.
What about that abortion pill?
So the abortion pill is amazing. The abortion pill is safe. The abortion pill has been politicized. Yet again, it's the method of choice in Europe, invented in France, came over here in the 90s. The abortion pill, when it came here, was immediately politicized, put on an FDA list of medications that are so dangerous that you have to have them administered by a doctor. P.S. It's safer than aspirin to take.
How does it? Should I be asking somebody else? I should have. But how does it work? Like
it's simple. It's simple how it works. So it's a 2-regimen pill. The first pill stops the fetus from detaching from the uterine wall. So it detaches from the uterine wall. And then within 24 hours, you take a regimen of 4 pills that you put under your tongue and you let them dissolve. Right here in your thing, you let them dissolve. And then what those pills do is expel the pregnancy from your body. So it's like having a heavy period. You can take this pill between 6 weeks and 10 weeks in the United States. In Europe, they go to 12 weeks, but in the United States, the FDA approved it for 10 weeks. And you should be able to get it from a pharmacist, get it by mail, get it. It's absolutely so safe. And it's very great to be able to have an abortion in the privacy of your home. It's like having a heavy period, and you have some cramping, and that is it. That is it.
So if that's if that's the case,
yes,
then
we got to get it off the list. It's called a REMS list. I can't remember. It's an acronym for something.
Mhm.
We have to get medication abortion off this list, and we have to get it so that you can get it by mail.
they're not going to allow that in those states. But how can they stop that? How? Like, I literally thought about you this weekend as I was out in my lawn winterizing the garden. And I said,
Screaming,
I bet
get
you...
off.
Huh?
Screaming, get off my lawn. You were thinking of me?
No, I was just sitting there thinking fondly about you because as I told you, like I'm emailing you and your publicist today, and they're like, what do you want to talk with Lizz about? I was like, fuck it, just put her on. But I go, I want to talk with her about how she's going to prevent Gilead from being created here. But no, I was thinking about you. I was like, Lizz and her creativity, she and her organization, they're going to find a way to get the pill to all of these states.
And that's what everyone should be thinking about right now is how do we access and help get medication?
I mail weed all over the country because I grow it and I say it here on the podcast because no one gives a fuck. You can mail that pill and a package of Sour Patch, whatever you want to do. Like, there's no way they can stop that medication. That was my thought, and I thought about you. I was like, Lizz is going to get medicine to people in these places where they can't leave.
Yes, and also, and this is very important, Pete, and this is a very, 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 very important thing, and I want everyone to listen up, and you can Google it, and it's true. If you take medication abortion, right? And sometimes, Pete, like everything, sometimes it is 90% effective and you have to go in and have a D&C, to clean, like your body didn't expel the entire pregnancy. And when I say entire pregnancy, it's like half of a lentil and basically the tissue in your uterus, right? Mm-hmm. So if you need to go in and have that done. Let's say you were having cramping and you didn't know what it was and you were scared and you didn't want anyone to know you took the abortion pills. Abortion pills are not detected in your system. They do not know you took them. There are people in countries where abortion is illegal that take abortion pills all the time.
Oh, really?
Yes. Nobody would ever know you took abortion pills. If you were just like, I'm cramping, I'm having I don't know what's going on, I'm having bleeding. They would treat your bleeding and nobody needs to know you took that abortion pill. No one. Because when it happens, and it's super rare, you can mostly just go to a clinic and say, I've taken the abortion pill and I'm having extra bleeding. Can you do an exam and make sure that...
But if you go... I'm trying to get ahead of you here. If you go to the clinic in Texas where abortion's illegal in Mississippi and you say, I took the pill, blank.
You can't do it there.
So
not in Mississippi.
You're saying...
you can in Mississippi because it's 15 weeks.
But
place. Nope. No, and here's what's...
I know, but just to be clear, I still have a question. To be clear,
stay with me on this. Stay with me on Texas.
Okay.
So, and the reason you can't is because... you can take the abortion. Well, Texas just passed a law now where you can't take the abortion pill after 7 weeks. So that's basically saying, abortion, be damned.
Yeah, but
whatever. But so what's been happening in Texas is people are scared to treat miscarriages because if they help with miscarriage management and that pregnancy is over 6 weeks, could somebody say you were assisting an abortion? Yes, they could sue you. And so the thing about this law in Texas, which I don't know if everybody understands, is anybody can bring a lawsuit against you no matter what. People could say that you and I were talking and they felt that you were going to conspire to help people get abortions in Texas. And then they could bring a case against you. And if they did, and you had to get a lawyer, even if you won, you can't get restitution for your legal fees. And so doctors are terrified. They don't want to have a malpractice or a lawsuit on their record. And physicians can't help physicians are very scared to help somebody if there's the hint that they'll be prosecuted for.
There is a very trusted listener of the podcast who's an ER physician in Texas. He knows who he is, and hopefully he's listening and want to talk to him more about it. But just to be clear, though, you're saying that pill, that course of medication, the abortion pill, as it's called?
Yep. It's called abortion pill. You take 2 dosage, mifepristone and misoprostol. In
a very small percentage of cases, there is a situation where you would need further care, and therein lies the concern in those states where it's been criminalized.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's only really Texas, because let's also be clear that the abortion ban in Texas was struck down in 12 other states because it's wholly unconstitutional. And the bounty piece was to fuck with people so they couldn't sue the state. That is why they orchestrated it so brilliantly that nobody even understands if you can't sue the state, who are you exactly suing? And if nobody brings a case before the state, then everyone's just sitting in paralysis, afraid to help anybody access getting an abortion or providing them, for fear that somebody will bring a case against them. So it's this law that's sitting there on the books that has just created a environment of fear to provide the care.
All right, I'll let you go, but what is the course of action that you are prescribing right now?
Well, the course of action, there's many things. First of all, please stay on top of what is happening. And one really fun way to do that is I have launched a talk show that is hilarious and funny with experts and activists who are coming on to talk about all these laws on a weekly basis, what we can do. People giving you tools of where you can help, not just donating money, but also where you can put your body, boots on the ground. Join the fight, be present to show that you care about the rights of people who don't look like you, so that we can say we are the party of family values. We are the people who don't want our children murdered in school by guns. We do not want our children murdered by cops. We want our kids to live healthy lives, and we want people who are pregnant to be able to thrive. Like, we are the pro-life party. So start taking that back and doing that. When you vote, when you meet politicians, try calling up your state legislators and saying, not only your keeping your job depends not only on you voting against this shit, but proposing proactive legislation that makes this procedure accessible.
And also,
my show's in Minnesota, because I'm doing a year in review show that is fucking hilarious.
Yes, that's all this information is in today's show notes. You can also go to aafront.org and make a donation to Lizz's organization.
Yes, do it. It's the end of the year. Do it.
But I do have to ask you one uncomfortable question. I see on Twitter you have really strangely come out in support of Dr. Oz for Pennsylvania Senate. Why? Why Oz? He's running as a Republican. How do you defend yourself?
Well, I think that I retweeted with a supportive message. Nobody likes you.
Made me laugh really hard. I'm not going to lie to you. I think I read that tweet on the can this morning. Laughed real hard. Sometimes the simplest joke is the most obvious one.
I agree. I also am a big fan of "You Seem Nice."
Yes. Laurie Kilmartin uses that a lot. I feel like you've used that. I love that. And you wrote, and Dr. Oz tweets, "I'm here to promise you one thing. I'm going to help reignite the divine spark inside every American and empower us to live better lives," which is such a lofty and amazing thing for him to commit to. And you wrote, quoting that tweet, "No one likes you." And you know what, Liz? Nobody does like Dr. Oz, but a bunch of people who stay at home and watch this dumb show. And I feel like Oprah should apologize for him. And
I feel like Oprah needs to come forward and say, I made a horrible mistake. I thought it was kind of cool when he would bring out like diseased organs next to clean organs.
Right. He seemed
but I'm like,
harmless.
at this point, I'm like, Joe Rogan's a better doctor than this fucking guy.
That's not untrue. That's not untrue.
You know.
Lizz Winstead, everybody. Thank you so
Thanks for having me and my rage. We feel really good.
I love you. Thank you.
Love you.
There she goes, Lizz Winstead. Lizz Winstead at Lizz Winstead. See her in Minneapolis at the end of the month. Follow her on Twitter at Lizz Winstead. Watch her YouTube show. Support her organization, which is a nonprofit abortion access front, aafront.org. Follow her on social media. And what else can I tell you? That's it. That's all I've got for you on today's show. I put a lot into it. I left it all in the field or in the shed as it is. I'm looking at Indy, and she wants to go inside. She's out here with me pretty much every night now. She loves to hang out with me and you. So thank you for spending some time with me and on this journey and supporting it. StandUpWithPete.com. I hope to see you tonight at our hangout. If you are a subscriber, if you've never been, you just want to hang out, you don't have to be active. You can just hang out and chill with your mic off. You just want to feel the community and the camaraderie and a lot of ball busting, for lack of a less sexist term. A lot of making fun of me. A lot of laughs. We love it. We love you. We hope that you show up tonight at 8. I'm out of time. John Carroll, gotta get back to your email. Thank you for it, and thank you for singing me out. Here we go right now.
Get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience. Well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up. Oh, got to stand